I'm going to go ahead and jump right into Forma Data here, data management. And for some of you, you might look at this and say, Dan, that looks very familiar. And I want to say, yes, it does. This is built right on top of the good old ACC Autodesk .com website. So it's from the docs, right? But it has additional features. And so one of the things you will notice is that if you're already in this environment, you will probably notice that when you go and create a new project, okay, you're going to notice that there's an option for data management. And so this is a list of all the projects here. And you can see it's got the access to my data management. I can set up from here, I can set up who's the project members are, who's the admins and things like that. And then if I go into the project itself, this is where I can specify, as an admin, I can go and specify who has access to a certain folder. I can have, these folders are populated, to help with, if I take a look at this and go inside here, you see there's my template. In my template, there is my tiny house TH template. And if I go up to my support, then we got things like fonts, you got patch pattern, plotters, tool palettes, and there's the good old CUI file that's posted right up there. So what's really nice is that we can put all this up here and onto the cloud. Now, before I go too far about this, away from this support, I did want to talk about, there are some people that have AutoCAD that is basically tailored to their organization. And the last thing you want is some other project to come in here and mess things up, right? It works slightly different. It uses something called Project Aware, which was introduced a while back, but Project Aware basically is an addition to it, to what you have. So let me show you what I mean. So here is my tiny house, and before I open that, I want to show you how we actually get to your from AutoCAD, how we can get to that. So I'm going to just go ahead and say close to that. When you're in your Start Welcome screen, you have all of these files that you recently accessed. There is an Autodesk project. This is where you're going to find all of your files from the project, the Forma Data Management. And so you can see here's my What's New webinar. Here's my drawing, and there's my tiny house. I also have my standards in here, and my standards will have my template, my support files. I have PDFs here. So there's some PDFs inside here of this. So if I go back into my drawing, and this right here is actually all synchronized by the desktop connector app. So all of this it's local. So it's not like I'm tied in directly to the Forma Data Management to get to this. But I can, if I lose internet connection, I can still have access to the files based on what I last, synchronized with. So I still have that. Now that I'm open with this, you'll see there is my file that I basically uploaded into the data format. Let me show you with the tool palette what I mean about, it's an addition to your current setting. So tool palettes is where you have a collection of these little tabs here. And these little tabs are basically, they're add-in from AutoCAD. They come standard. You might see things like, let's go into mechanical tab. There's mechanical stuff like bolts and anchor bolts. If we go into the architectural, if I can find the architectural, actually, I do not see my architectural tab. Okay, but you can see there's other models, there's other things that we can bring in. So I am missing my architectural tab, but I would have included windows, doors, and things like that. So, but if we take a look at my other drawing here, this Bank A, this is actually a separate, take a look at this. I have right up here, it says current project. This is tied into my Project Aware or the Forma Data Management. If I click on it, it says, hey, you need to, upload it. This file isn't tied into the Forma Data. This is just a local file that I have. So here's all the standard stuff. So that's what I meant by, in addition to what you have locally or as your configuration, the Project Aware brings in this, and you can see this little blue icon just kind of showing you this little line here. This is actually a project-based one. And only a project that is tied into data Forma, and in particular, if they were tied into this the webinar project that I created, will they have access to this. So if I uploaded the bank A to a separate project, they won't see this one. Only if I have this tied into that new project. So that's your file management aspect, is where we can actually manage it, the certain access to certain information, certain templates and things like that. If I do Control N for a new template, it goes right into my TH template tier. With that, again, it's local, but it's tied into my project. Here's the Hagerman hub here. There's my project, which is the webinar, the AutoCAD 2027. And then you can see where it browses into the individual folders here: project file, standard, and then templates. So the desktop connector will go ahead and synchronize with the Forma Data Management, bringing in all of those folders and files and things like that. Now, if I go back to my Banks project here, which is not tied into Forma, you can see that right now. If I go and do Control N, it brings me back to my templates that were based out of the AutoCAD configuration. So I can still have a hybrid setup, which is what I would expect out of this, because not all projects will be tied into the Forma Data Management, right? So you may have some local project, you may have some things that that you are not going to be obviously taking advantage of that, but you can still maintain that kind of functionality inside of AutoCAD.